Today's lesson is You Can't Say That. Social media's right to silence users. Hi, everybody. I am Roger.
And I am Helen.
Now, today we're talking about something called social media and whether social media websites or platforms have the right to silence users. Can they censor content like dictatorships do?
That's a very good question because a lot of people get their information, get the news from social media these days. And so a lot of this information can influence the way people think, while its truthfulness can be put into question. So all of these situations raise the question, should social media make an effort to control what is being read by its users?
Right, so this is kind of controversial, so we'll try to deal with this subject as objectively as we can. So let's get into it. Let's read the first paragraph right now and find out what this is all about.
You can't say that. Social media's right to silence users. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, social media companies have been accused of censoring certain posts, tagging them with fact checks, or even removing them altogether. These actions sparked a fierce debate over whether social media platforms should be able to censor harmful material. If censoring becomes the norm, would it be used to silence voices and opinions that companies such as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube disagree with? Would it constitute a violation of free speech?
大家好，第一部分我们看到动词 censor 指审查、检查，像是 Government officials censored the art show 政府官员审查这场艺文展，或是 The movie was censored in a number of countries because of its violent content 那部电影因其暴力内容而在好几个国家受到审查修改。另外，这个字的字尾加上 ship 就成了名词 censorship， 意思是审查制度。举例来说 Due to government censorship, many of the artist's most controversial works were removed from the exhibition. 由于政府的审查，这个艺术家许多最具争议性的作品从展览中被撤下。再来，我们看到单字 spark， 这个字是动词，指引发、引起，像是The economic crisis sparked panic throughout the country. 经济危机引发该国全面恐慌。另外，这个字也可以当名词，指火花、火星。举例来说 Nick threw branches on the fire, causing sparks to fly up in the air. Nick 把树枝丢进火里，使得空中飞溅出火花。接着，我们看到名词 norm， 指常规、常态、规范、行为准则。例如Wearing t-shirts and jeans is the norm for many high school students. T-shirt 和牛仔裤是许多高中生的日常穿着。或是 Driving on the left-hand side of the road is the norm in England and Australia. 道路上靠左行驶是英国和澳洲的规范。另外，补充一个相关片语 become the norm 表示成为常态。我们可以说 After a while, it became the norm for me to have an afternoon snack. 过了一段时间，下午吃点心就成了我的习惯。再来，我们看到单字 violation 指违反、违背，像是 Driving through a red light is a traffic violation. 开车闯红灯是交通违规行为。或是 The rats in the restaurant's kitchen were a violation of public health laws. 那间餐厅的厨房有老鼠入侵，违反了公共卫生法规。
Let's dive right into the first paragraph of today's lesson on You Can't Say That, social media's right to silence users. And it says here, throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, social media companies have been accused of censoring certain posts, tagging them with fact checks, or even removing them altogether. So this is a question that has become all the more relevant in the age of COVID-19 because during the COVID-19 COVID-19 pandemic, we've had a lot of information about where COVID-19 came from, who started it, and how it's being spread and how it's spreading. A lot of information that's kind of floating around social media. And so the question is, should social media control some of this information that's being put out? And because of the situation, social media companies have been accused of censoring certain posts. That is, people have said that social media companies have been doing wrong things or they have broken the law. They're doing things that they shouldn't be doing, which is censoring certain posts. To censor, of course, means to remove parts of a book or a movie that's in the past. But today, you also censor posts online by taking it off so that people can no longer access it.
Okay, so we've got the verb to accuse, and usually this is a phrase to accuse someone of something or to be accused of something. That means somebody said that you committed a certain crime. For example, you might be accused of stealing secrets from your company and selling them to the competition or something like that. Or you could be accused of murder. You could be accused of shoplifting and things like that. And lots of these social media companies like Twitter, Facebook, etc., they have been accused of censoring certain posts. And censoring, of course, occurs in controlled societies like China and North Korea. They censor information all the time because it's just too sensitive.
Right, but how do they censor? How do these social media companies censor information or posts? They do it by tagging them with fact checks or even removing them altogether. So they don't always just remove the posts, but they might make it obvious that there's something questionable about this post, so they'll tag them, which means they'll put a label on them with fact checks, which basically means that the information behind the post have been checked to see if it's actually truthful or not.
Exactly. So that's what a fact check is. They try to check the background and find out if the information is actually correct. Did that person actually do that? Did that person actually say that, etc.? And these actions sparked a fierce debate over whether social media platforms should be able to censor harmful material. Should we have a free flow of information? Should there be free speech? Or should they have the right to control their content? And that's the debate, okay? That's what they're arguing about. These actions sparked a fierce debate. Here we've got the word spark being used as a verb. That just means it starts something going, okay? Like the spark plug in your scooter. It starts the chain reaction of the fuel-air mixture in the combustion chamber igniting and driving the piston down through the cylinder. You get the idea there. This sparks a fierce debate. That is fierce. That is intense. People are arguing about this. They're calling each other names. They're getting angry. They're throwing sand at each other. They're starting to cry and things like that. It's not a pretty sight.
Right. So on one side, you have people who think if censoring becomes the norm, would it be used to silence voices and opinions that companies such as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube disagree with? In other words, would we be giving too much power to these social media companies, power that allows them to erase any opinion that doesn't agree with these companies' point of view or that may damage their business? So do we want to give this power to these very powerful companies?
Yeah, it might become the norm or the normal situation. So yeah, we don't want things to be like Nazi Germany or North Korea or something like that. We don't want to have this kind of censorship going on all the time. But yeah, if it becomes normal or if it becomes the norm, could they silence voices? Could they silence people that they don't want to hear from? And some voices and opinions and ideas may not be appreciated from companies like Facebook, Twitter, and even YouTube. They might disagree with those voices and those opinions, and they'll just say, nope, we're not going to let you say what you want to say. We're going to censor you. We're going to silence you.
And even worse, would it constitute a violation of free speech? So it's not just a matter of giving these companies the power to do something that perhaps they shouldn't do, but maybe it's really a violation of of some of our basic human rights. Would it constitute a violation of free speech? Now here, constitute, this verb means to be considered to be so. So if A constitutes B, then A is considered to be B. So I could also say during the times of COVID-19, not wearing a mask constitutes a violation of the law. In other words, it is considered a violation of the law. So would giving these social media companies like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube the power to silence voices constitute a violation of free speech?
Yeah, does this content constitute a violation of free speech, or at least the suppression of these opinions, does it count as a violation of free speech? And if so, maybe you could sue them for millions of dollars. Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson. Let's move on now to the next part.
Many uninformed people have overreacted to this censorship. Some believe their political positions are being unfairly silenced, and others believe that any attempt to suppress free speech is a slippery slope towards totalitarianism.
第二部分，我们看到动词 suppress 指压制、抑制、镇压、阻止，像是 The dictatorship suppressed any negative news stories. 那个独裁政府会把任何负面的新闻报道压下来，或是 The doctor gave the patient some drugs to suppress his immune system. 那位医生给了病人一些药物来抑制其免疫系统。
And so we're talking about a debate basically concerning social media and their power, their ability to silence certain opinions through the posts that people upload on these social media platforms. And here we have, first of all, one opinion or one side of the argument, and it says many uninformed people have overreacted to this censorship. Some believe their political positions are being unfairly silenced, and others believe that any attempt to suppress free speech is a slippery slope towards totalitarianism. So on the one hand, the writer thinks people have overreacted to this kind of censorship, but these people are uninformed. And here, uninformed basically means not having all the information or not really knowing the full facts of a particular situation. And these people are uninformed. And since they are uninformed, they have overreacted to censorship. To overreact means to react to something too emotionally or by doing things that aren't necessary.
Yeah, this happens all the time. Sometimes people overreact. They're thinking too much about things. And yes, maybe they're just too sensitive about censorship. And of course, some people believe their political positions are being unfairly silenced. Okay, maybe I have a radical position. Maybe it's an opinion that few other people have, but you have no right to silence me. Well, others believe that any attempt to suppress free speech is a slippery slope towards totalitarianism. So if you suppress something, you basically stop it from happening. You might want to suppress free speech, for example. You just don't let people say what they want to say. And if you do that, then maybe that is a slippery slope. In other words, if one thing starts, then all sorts of things are going to happen as a result. In the United States, I think they're probably arguing about this. If they legalize marijuana, if you legalize marijuana, that's a slippery slope. Then people are going to start using cocaine and crack cocaine and methadone. They're just going to use everything if you let one thing start.
True. So basically, a slippery slope is a problem that can get worse if it isn't stopped. So a person could be on a slippery slope to poverty if that person has just lost their job and is not able to make rent, and that is just a slow descent into a bad state.
Exactly. So, yeah, you got to be careful there. Of course, we're trying to look at both sides of this argument. Should some voices be silenced because they're just spewing nonsense, or should we let people say whatever they want to because it's free speech? It's quite controversial, and it's difficult to come to any conclusions. Okay, let's move on now to the third part and not jump to conclusions.
Before jumping to conclusions, however, people should be aware of exactly what has been censored and why. The censorship has in fact been an effort by social media platforms to combat dangerous false information being spread about the pandemic, primarily by people in positions of political power. In a period of global crisis with many lives at stake, removing false information is without a doubt the moral thing to do. And most Americans agree. A recent Pew Research Center survey found that the majority of Americans strongly approve of these decisions to label posts from both politicians and ordinary users as inaccurate or misleading.
最后第三部分，我们看到单字 combat， 这个字也可以念作 combat， 它是动词，指打击、对抗与战斗，像是 To combat the disease, doctors suggest that people wash their hands regularly. 为了对抗这个疾病，医生建议民众要经常洗手。另外，这个字也可以当名词，指斗争、战斗。例如 My uncle received a medal for bravery in combat. 我叔叔因为在战争中的英勇表现，获颁一枚勋章。
So in the third part, we have here, before jumping to conclusions, however, people should be aware of exactly what has been censored and why. So we never want to jump to conclusions. To jump to conclusions means to make a decision about something without having all of the facts. So you can make a wrong decision or you can think the wrong things or do the wrong things if you jump to conclusions. For instance, if I see two people, a man and a woman, having dinner at a restaurant, I shouldn't jump to conclusions by thinking that they're a couple. Maybe they are just work associates, a brother and a sister, and so on. So you don't want to come to a conclusion too quickly.
So yeah, take a look at the information and try to determine whether the information should be censored, like if it's dangerous or something, or whether they should have their opinion. Now, the censorship has in fact been an effort by social media platforms to combat dangerous false information being spread about the pandemic. And about elections as well. They, of course, go on all the time. Here we've got the word combat, which means to fight something, to fight against something. We want to combat piracy, for example. We don't want people to copy music and movies and things like that. That is piracy. We want to combat piracy. But, yeah, these media platforms want to combat that false information. Yeah, fake news. I think that's what they're talking about here.
Right. So the writer here is supporting censorship. The writer is presenting a point of view that says that censorship is actually not so bad because the censorship here is an effort by social media platforms to combat dangerous false information that can harm society. Because if we don't know the right things about the pandemic, about what the pandemic can actually do to society, do to our health, then we don't have the tools to be able to confront the situation effectively. So censorship by social media is actually helpful to society in this sense.
That's right, especially when we're dealing with something as serious and potentially deadly like the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. And in a period of global crisis with many lives at stake, removing false information is without a doubt the moral thing to do. So yeah, we have this global crisis, a problem that exists all over the world, and many lives are at stake. If something's at stake, there is a risk, okay? It's possible that lots of people could die because of this problem. So false information is dangerous. So yes, removing that false information is without a doubt the moral thing to do. Without a doubt means there is no doubt. It's absolutely 100% the correct thing to do.
Yes, without a doubt can also be used for emphasis. I could say something like, I will come to your birthday party without a doubt. You can count on me. There is no doubt that I will be there.
Right, and I think we have to remember that information is being censored all the time. Newspapers, of course, have all sorts of information, but they choose to print only some things and not others. So, yeah, sometimes you just have to let things stay suppressed, like information about how to make a nuclear bomb. We don't want people to have that information, so of course, that information should not be out there. So, again, withholding information sometimes, without a doubt, is the moral and the correct thing to do. And most Americans agree. Most Americans agree with this position. A recent Pew Research Center survey found that the majority of Americans strongly approve of these decisions to label posts on social media from both politicians or regular folks as inaccurate or misleading.
Right. So most Americans, most people actually agree with censorship in this particular situation. So it's not as if what these social media companies are doing is going against the majority of Americans' point of view. Everyone is in agreement that certain information, especially when the information is misleading, should be censored, should be suppressed.
Yeah, that's what most people in America think, and it's probably the case here in Taiwan as well. Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. Time now to hear from our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。在新冠肺炎疫情期间，社群媒体公司呢会审查某些特定的贴文。那课文第一部分它就写到These actions sparked a fierce debate over whether social media platforms should be able to censor harmful material. 好，句子里面它这个 whether social media platforms should be able to censor harmful material. 社群媒体平台是否能审查有害内容这个部分呢，它就是由 whether 引导的名词子句在句子里面来当受词用。好，那我们就来学习 whether 引导名词子句的用法。Whether 去引导名词子句，它表示是否怎么样。那这部分可以当主词、受词或是补语。特别注意，当主词的时候要记得搭配单数动词。那我们来看3个例句。第一个例句 Whether he comes to the party doesn't matter to me. 无论他是否会来参加派对，对我来说都不重要。那名词子句 Whether he comes to the party 是当主词用，必须视为单数，所以我们后面搭配的否定助动词是用 doesn't而不是 don't。 第二个例句 I wonder whether it's a good idea to postpone the trip. 不知道把旅行延期是不是个好主意。那么名词子句 whether it's a good idea to postpone the trip 是用来当受词，也就是当我们这个动词 wonder 的受词。第三个例句 The question is whether they can be trusted. 问题就在于他们能不能被信任。这个名词子句Whether they can be trusted 是当主词补语用，是用来补充说明这个主词 the question 的内容。好，课文第二部分的第二句则是写到说，有些人认为他们的政治立场受到不公平的压制，有些人则认为任何试图阻止言论自由都注定会走向极权主义。好，文中是用到 some believe怎么样怎么样 and others believe 怎么样怎么样来表达有些人认为什么什么，有些人则认为什么什么。那我们来学这样的用法 some 什么什么 others 什么什么，这表示有些怎么样，有些怎么样。那这个用法呢，是在没有限定范围的人事物里面来列举出两种群体的状况。像我们可以说 Many students are on the playground. Some are running.Others are playing basketball. 许多学生在操场上，有些在跑步，有些在打篮球。那可能还有一些学生在踢足球啊、打棒球、聊天什么的，只是我们没有列举出来而已。好，另外 some 和 other 也可以当形容词，所以我们可以用 some 名词什么什么 other 名词什么什么这样的句型来表达。只是我们为了避免重复名词，这个 other 名词也常常就直接用代名词 others 来取代。举例来说 Some people like summer while others prefer winter. 有些人喜欢夏天，而有些人喜欢冬天。那我们句子里面就是用 others 来取代 other people 来避免重复名词。好，以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天的单字吧。
Accuse. Keith accused his classmate of stealing his idea for the presentation. Spark. Tina's question sparked a long discussion during the business meeting. Norm. Treating others with respect should be the norm rather than the exception. Constitute. Working for another company might constitute breaking your contract. Violation. Preventing people from accessing education is a violation of their rights. Suppress. The government tried to suppress the circulation of the book. Combat. The police are working hard to combat crime in the poorest neighborhoods. Mislead. This article is incorrect and could easily mislead the public.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Roger.
I'm Helen.
See you next time.